Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev. Something I've never done before here on Let's Dev is, well, there's a lot of things I haven't done, but one of them is be educational, which isn't too surprising since that's never what Let's Dev has been about. But one of the most common questions I've gotten since starting the series has been some variation of how do I get started? And I've always tried to help point people in the right direction, but I think I can maybe do one better. So today I'm going to try and help those of you who are interested in stepping into the world of game development but have no idea where to start. I'll show you not only some basic code to get started, but also try to provide some context for said code, and hopefully provide some perspective to keep you going once you have started. But be warned, I'm not very good at teaching, and I'm not even sure how helpful today's video will actually be, so therefore, I make no promises. But with that said, let's get to it, shall we? Now, before we can write our first line of code, we need to understand what it means to code something. Let's take the classic example of Super Mario Bros. The basics of Mario are to run and jump. When Mario jumps, you expect gravity to pull him back down, because that's how it works in real life. And so your first instinct might be to Google something like how do I code gravity, which will net an abundance of results, probably an overwhelming amount, and that's for good reason. The reality is that gravity as we know it in the real world doesn't actually exist in Mario's world. Gravity in Mario's world is just a number. Technically speaking, gravity could mean anything from bringing Mario back down after a jump to giving him the Master Sword from Zelda. We can't just expect the virtual world to understand what gravity is unless we specifically tell it what gravity does. Now, this may seem abstract for some of you, so let's see if we can code something to put this into better perspective. Let's start a new project in GameMaker, making sure to go with the GameMaker language option. While drag and drop in GameMaker is a great way to get acquainted with GameMaker's features, I highly recommend learning GameMaker's language as early as possible. Almost everything you need to know about it can be found in the documentation, so don't be afraid to use it. Now back to our project. Let's create our hero, starting with the sprite. We're going to be mimicking Hotline Miami for this example, so consider drawing something in the same vein. This will serve to help give perspective to the code we're about to write. And don't worry about making it fancy, we just need something to test with. Now with your hero sprite created, let's create a new object for our hero. Add the hero sprite to the object and place it in a room. Place it near the center for best results. Close the room tab and let's get back to our hero object. It's time to get to some coding. Now for this next part, feel free to follow at your own pace and pause the video at any time. It's not going anywhere. So first, let's add a step event to our hero object. This is important and I'll explain why in a bit. Next, mouse over to the code editor and type the following exactly as you see it here. If keyboard check VK up Y minus equals 1. Since this code is running in the step event, the game will always be checking whether the up arrow is being pressed. And if it is, we're telling the game to move our hero up 1 pixel for every frame that the up key is held for. Go ahead and test your game if you'd like to see it in action. Your hero should move up as long as you hold the up key. Once you're ready to continue, close the game window and return to the code editor. We'll add some similar code for the other 3 directions our player can move. Let's start with the down movement. If keyboard check VK down, Y plus equals 1. Next, let's do the left movement. If keyboard check VK left, X minus equals 1. And right movement, if keyboard check VK right, X plus equals 1. If you did it correctly, you should now be able to test your game and have your hero move in 4 different directions depending on the arrow key you press. And congratulations, you've just made some great progress. Now let's talk about what we did here. As you may have noticed, by pressing up and down, we're changing the hero's vertical value, otherwise known as the Y value, and left and right change the horizontal value, otherwise known as the X value. These correspond to the hero's position in the room. Everything in 2D games exists on what's called the X and Y axis, Y referring to the vertical axis and X referring to the horizontal axis. You can think of it like longitude and latitude coordinates on maps. So by pressing a direction, we're telling the code to move our hero on the corresponding axis. Now imagine at this point some of you are thinking, okay, that's cool, we just made a hero who can walk in 4 directions, which would be great if we're making something like Zelda, but you started this whole thing talking about Mario and gravity. First off, that was a mouthful. Second, we're getting there. So let's make 2 minor adjustments to our project. Let's first change the sprite from our current sprite to something more akin to a 2D platformer sprite. and let's remove the check for the down key in our code. Let's hit test. And just like that, we've added some gravity to our new platformer code. So what just happened? Well, remember that any code that we add to the step event is being executed at all times. By removing the check for the down key, we're not telling GameMaker to move our hero down the y-axis automatically, kind of like how we expect gravity to pull us down in real life. Couple that with a change in sprites to shift our perspective, and suddenly now we're less Zelda and more Mario. We got to this point by not thinking about what gravity is, but rather what gravity does. Remember, no matter what the game's perspective may be, Hotline Miami, Mario, or even Diablo, in a 2D world, everything exists and depends on X and Y positioning. So looking up a tutorial or guide on building a platformer is fine, but it's gonna be hard to learn from those if you're only asking how and not why. Don't just copy what you see, instead learn why things are written as they are. That feeling of being overwhelmed is common, even for someone like myself who has been doing this for a while. The best way I've found to handle being overwhelmed is to break it down into simpler, more manageable forms, just like we did today. Now, obviously, our example is not a fully functional platforming engine. There's a lot missing, but if you take things slow, stay calm, and research everything you come across, well, those missing features eventually will no longer be missing. So go forth, Grasshopper, and begin your own journey. It won't be an easy road, and you will fail. A lot. But stay positive, remain persistent, and you will eventually find your own way. It's entirely possible that my approach won't work for you, so find what does work for you and stick with it. And in case this video was a complete fail that helped no one, sorry. Thank you for watching until the end anyway.